Want to build some muscle? Let's dive in.
Welcome to a Healthy Control podcast, providing education to create a healthy, balanced lifestyle, empowering you to take control of your health and not let health take control of you.
What's up, health nuts? Hopefully you're having a good day so far. And what's up, health nuts?
Welcome to a Healthy Control podcast, providing education to create a healthy, balanced lifestyle, empowering you to take control of your health and not let health take control of you.
What's up, health nuts? Hopefully you're having a good day so far. I'm super excited about today's episode because we're going to talk all about building muscle. I think there's so many reasons people want to build muscle, whether it's athletically, you just want to feel better about yourself and look a little better, or it's your outlet for, stress and emotions and things like that. But there's a lot of reasons why people want to build muscle, and it's super important to do so. Now today, in this episode, we're going to talk about kind of the science of actually building muscle. Then we're going to get into more application and dive really deep into how to actually do that. And at the end, I was going to give you a nice summary of, hey, these 7 bullet points, this is kind of what the take-home message is. But we got a lot of great stuff lined up today. Even going to be giving you exactly how much you need to lift per muscle to get the best results. But let's get into the science first because, it's good to understand what's happening here. But I don't want to get super into the weeds of the physiological process of muscle growth. So let's just summarize it this way. You work out, you damage your muscles. Your body then, it'll release some signals to repair the damage. And the body's pretty smart. The muscles are smart. And they're going to realize, okay, I just had this amount of intensity on my muscles and it damaged it. So I should probably repair my muscles to be able to handle at least that much. See, our body wants to survive, it wants to grow, and if something like just walking to the bathroom in the morning was damaging, that it's going to be a hard life if you can't walk but 20 feet. So your body tries to repair and grow and get stronger and bigger. So you work out week after week, and these series of micro tears, that's the little tears that are happening all the time, well, eventually it builds up enough that you're significantly stronger and have bigger muscles. It's 100% true. You do not get jacked. You do not gain a bunch of muscle overnight. It takes weeks and months and years. Not to stray too far off, but I've worked with a lot of women in the past, and they will want to, quote unquote, build muscle, but I don't want to look jacked. Or I don't want to look manly. Let me tell you this. If it was that easy to get jacked and look manly, quote unquote, everybody would be doing it. Like, that's not something that just like, oh crap, I got too much muscle. Like, no, it's a huge process. You're not going to just wake up one day with too much muscle. So, muscle strength and muscle hypertrophy they're two very different things. Hypertrophy just means size, bigger size. So you can be stronger without being any bigger, and you can get bigger without being much stronger. This is more of a terminology thing. So most of today, we're talking about muscle hypertrophy, or how to get bigger muscles. Now, another science application that's just going to be important to talk about real quick, but it's muscle protein synthesis and muscle atrophy. Simplest form here. All day, our muscles are either getting synthesized or built up, or they're getting degraded or torn down. You may have heard at some point that you need to eat within 2 hours of training, or else, the training wasn't worth it, or you're not maximizing your growth or whatever. That's not the case. That's not the case. That window is not 2 hours. It's actually more like 24 hours. If you work out, that muscle protein synthesis, that open window for muscle building is actually around 24 hours. We also have nutrient-driven muscle protein synthesis, which that's about 90 minutes after eating. Now, maybe that's what 1990 Jim Bro meant when he said, work or eat after, within 2 hours. I don't know. But if you're going to work out, you got about 24 hours to kind of muscle protein synthesize and get bigger muscles. But just strictly off nutrition, you have about 90 minutes. And what that means is that during that time, we'll see a peak in the muscle protein synthesis, and then it will slowly go back down. So it's like your bank account. Every other Friday you get a peak in the amount of money, and then it slowly over the next 2 weeks goes back down. Now, on the other side of the coin, if you stop exercising, or I'm sure you've seen a loved one as they get older, they get a little smaller, muscles get a little smaller, they're a little bit weaker, because if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So our bodies are, again, constantly creating or degrading muscle every single day, under the right circumstances. And this isn't one of those things where I think that you really need to biohack and focus on, doing the optimal best thing. I think what's important with this is to know that if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So try to stay active, and that you have more than a 2-hour window after your workouts to eat protein. Maybe there are some little hacks here and there, but I think if you get caught up in this too much, you're kind of missing the bigger picture. Which, let's get to that. Let's get to the application here. So, thinking back, I think I first started lifting about 6th grade, and I heard the concept. If you want to work out for endurance, you need to do 20 plus reps per set. If you want hypertrophy or bigger muscles, you need 8 to 20 reps, and then strength is 4 to 8, and then power is 1 to 3 reps, something like that. And then we can track how much you're lifting by total volume, which is number of sets times the number of reps times how much weight you lifted. And this can give you a number that you can track, and each week you want to increase that number, and that's progressive overload. And well, that's really oversimplified, and that's not necessarily the case anymore. The first study we're going to talk about here, it looked at low versus high load resistance training. So how heavy was it? The low load group did 25 to 35 reps, and then the high load did 8 to 12, which 8 to 12 reps isn't really a high, low, we'll say medium. Anyways, so they both did 3 sets of 7 different exercises, 3 days per week. And both groups produced statistically significant increases in thickness of elbow flexors, so biceps, and elbow extensors, or triceps, and the quadris femoris, which is in your quads on your legs. And there was no significant differences noted between the groups. So what this study just said is, hey, we took really high reps and moderately high reps, and they both had the same growth of muscles, which completely goes against the old theory of 20 plus reps is endurance and 8 to 20 is hypertrophy. Because if that was the case, we would have seen that 8 to 12 group have more size growth, but in this study, 8 to 12 versus 25 to 35 produce the same amount of growth. All right, still in this study here, improvements in the back squat strength were significantly greater for the high load compared to the low load. And it was significant. It was about 19.6% versus 8.8%. So what's that? That's double the growth of strength by doing heavier weight. And then there was a trend for a greater increase in 1 rep max on the bench press, 6.5% versus 2% respectively. And then they also tested the endurance with the bench press. They found that the low load group, so doing high reps, low weight, got 16.6% better at endurance. And the high load group, so that's the group that is doing fewer reps with more weight, actually got worse. They got negative 0.12% worse at endurance. Now, this is just one study. Let's not make giant conclusions off it. And it's not the longest or the biggest. And there's more studies that need to be done. But what this points to is that hypertrophy, or building muscle, is pretty much found in all rep ranges. Endurance, and we'll say maximal strength or 1 rep max, is much more dependent upon your training. If you want to get more endurance, you probably should be doing more reps. If you want to get good at doing a 1 rep max, you should probably lift heavier. And that just makes sense. If you want to get better at math, you study math. If you want to get better at history, you study history. You don't cross or whatever. So hypertrophy, just work out. Strength and endurance and power, you kind of need to be a little more specific in your training. We've sort of known this for a long time. It's called the principle of specificity. the principle of specificity. Such a hard word. Anyways, which just means that if you want to get good at something, you practice that thing. Now, there is a concept called the carryover effect, in that if you want to, let's say, be a better runner, that biking can help you somewhat towards running. It has some carryover. Or if you want a better bench press, doing an overhead press can have some carryover or some improvement on your bench press. Specificity, carryover. Those what those two are. And there's another study that I found here that muscle strength improvement was superior for high load and moderate load compared to low load resistance training, but a non-significant superior effect for high compared to moderate. So what that means is that high and moderate weight, so heavy and really heavy, was much better than not very heavy, but really heavy and heavy, not really a difference between the two. So you don't always need to be just lifting your 1 rep max, 2 reps, 3 reps. You can train in the 3 to 6 range and still improve your strength, and it's a lot less wear and tear on your body too. But in regards to building muscle, what seems to be the most important factor for right now, how we understand it in this day and age, is your working sets or your hard sets. And that's really where the issue with counting everything as before faulted. We used to count every rep, every set, all the weight, multiply it, and that was your total volume of the day. But if I did 100 reps of 2-pound bicep curls, that would be 200 volume. But that's not nearly as beneficial as, let's say, 20 pounds for 10 reps, which is also 200 volume. So the way the industry seems to be moving is to count your working sets that are more challenging. So what is a challenging set? And I think that's a very important terminology to kind of define here. What actually should count in your working sets, or what actually counts towards building muscle? Because 100 reps of 2-pound bicep curls is probably not going to count. What does count is being close-ish to failure. Now, what the heck does being close-ish to failure mean? This does not mean squatting until you literally cannot get the bar up anymore and you fail the rep. We're looking for 1 to 3 reps away from failure. If you know about the RPE training, or rate of perceived exertion, this is probably going to be more like an 7.5 to 8 out of 10. There's RIR, which is reps in reserve, so that would literally be 1 to 3 reps in reserve. If you don't care or follow either one of those, as you're lifting, and this is a skill, but think about how many more reps can I do? And that's a very hard skill to develop, because let's take this squat, where let's say you struggle a lot at the bottom or getting out of the hole, and then the weight gets about halfway up, you stand about halfway up, and then boom, it's super easy. Well, if you try to judge that whole, how many do I have left off of the top, it's like, yeah, I could keep doing half squats all day long, but at the bottom, I nearly failed. So it's super easy to be like, well, I finished it really strong. I probably have several more that I can do. But in reality, at your weakest point, that's where you have to judge it. At the bottom of the squat, or wherever your weakest point is, how many do you think you can realistically do? And we've seen in studies, which I don't have this one listed, it's just something I remember from a long time ago, that beginners and people who haven't practiced this skill are awful about it. It was something like 5 to 10 extra reps they could do, where they thought they were done. The researchers said, okay, you said you're done. Now just keep going until you actually do fail. And they just kept going and going and going and going and going. So it's a skill, just like learning how to squat is a skill, that the only way to get better at it is to keep practicing it. So what I've done before is literally what I just said the testers do. All right, got that bench press up. I think I got 2 more in me. All right, boom, boom, boom. Okay, I just hit 2. Well, let me see how many more I can actually get. And then all of a sudden I've got 5 instead of 2. And then you cue that in for next time, and you learn that way. The other caveat with being 1 to 3 reps away from failure, again, you don't want to actually fail the weight. And then also what I consider failure is technical failure as well. So we all consider, hey, you couldn't stand up, you failed the squat, you're done. But technical failure is you got it, but your hips shot up a lot, and then you actually end up just doing a giant good morning, and it looked awful, and your knees were caving, and you're wobbly. It's like clearly from the outside that looked awful. Even though you got it, it looked really bad. So you're probably done at that point. If you technically fail, as in you don't get the lift up, yeah, you're done. But also, if your form starts to break down, that means whatever muscle group is responsible for that part of the form just failed on you. And it's time to stop that set. You're done. So I want to go back to the RPE and the RIR, rate of perceived exertion, and reps in reserve real quick, because those are systems that can be challenging. And my wife and I, she used to train on this RPE system, and I still do, but it wasn't ever intuitive for her as much as she tried. Like, it just didn't make sense. It's kind of like a pain scale. It's like, hey, what the heck actually is a 7 out of 10 pain? I don't know. But what we changed it for her, instead of RPE or the numbers, I said, did it feel light, easy, medium, hard, or difficult? Boom. It worked for her just like magic. And from there, now she had her own subjective scale, and we would say, all right, let's do 3 sets of 5. I want the last one to be hard. Let's do 4 sets of 6. I want them all to be medium. And then she was able to tailor her training based off of that. The point is, do whatever system works best for you. Just remember, 1 to 3 reps away from failure. And technical failure counts as well. So I want to transition here. We talked about the science, and we talked about staying away from failure, both technical and absolute. Let's get into a little more application here of how many sets you do need for each muscle group, and some very practical tips on how to improve your workouts for muscle growth right after the break. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I have a little challenge for you here. I challenge you to tell one person about this podcast. That's it. Just one person. Tell them what you liked. Tell them what episode you listened to. Now let's get back into the episode. All right, let's get into some more practical stuff that you can really apply to your workouts. I think I first started really researching and getting into how to train better probably about 8 to 10 years ago. And Dr. Mike Israetel had a chart out at the time, and it's really been a great cornerstone for a lot of the muscle building stuff I've been doing. I'm going to get into the chart, but there's a lot of numbers with this, so I do suggest you look it up. And that's Dr. Mike Israetel, Israetel, and then just type like MRV chart, M as in mom, R as in ranger, V as in Victor. So each muscle group has a range of volume it can handle. Some muscle groups don't need any volume at all to maintain their size, such as your abs, all 3 sides of your shoulders, front, back, and side. And actually your glutes and your trap. They don't need any dedicated volume because they're getting work done in other things. Meaning when you squat and deadlift, those are going to work your glutes a lot. But it's not a glute specific exercise per se. Same thing with your traps. When you deadlift or you're holding that heavy bar, your traps are working isometrically to help keep your shoulders in place versus letting them really droop down to your hips. So you're not, doing a bunch of shrugs, but your traps are still getting some volume. There's also the minimal effective volume, or the MEV, and that is the number of sets per week that you need to hit to see some growth. A little caveat here, first of probably many, is that the specific number that you need may not line up directly with this chart, but it's a really good place to start. Now, your chest and your back have the highest MEV with 10 sets, meaning you should get at least 10 sets of back and of chest per week. Biceps, quads, front, side, and rear delts all are listed at 8 sets, while triceps and hamstrings are at 6 sets. Abs, front delts, glutes, traps, still at 0 sets needed. Again, they just get hit with everything else. Now, that's just what you need to do for the minimum. A minimum effective volume, minimum amount of sets needed to just see some growth. Now, here's the goal. Here's the maximal adaptive volume, or the rough range of optimal growth. Then there's also the MRV, which is the maximal recoverable volume, which is higher than your MAV. And all of those maximal recoverable volumes are like 12 plus, 18 plus, 25 plus, because it's different for everybody. But that's a maximum recoverable volume, meaning if you go above that, you're no longer able to actually properly recover. So it's kind of better to just stay away from that just a little bit and stay within your MAV, or your maximum adaptive volume, for that optimal growth. Are you hanging with me so far? So each muscle group has a range of less than this won't really do anything. You need at least this many sets to see some growth. And then it has a proper range of optimalness. And then it has anything above this is probably too much. So MAV, maximal adaptive volume, that's where we're going to hang out here for a while. Your core, your side and rear delts, and trap, they can handle a lot of volume. We're talking upwards of 20 sets per week. This makes a lot of sense when you think about it. They're smaller muscles. So you're not going to be doing a front raise with 95-pound dumbbells. You do front raises with like 10, 20, 30, maybe 40 rep or pounds. Smaller muscles lift smaller amounts of weight relatively, which means that they can handle relatively more sets. So core, delts, and traps, smaller. Next step up, I guess, it would be the chest. It can handle like 12 to 20 sets per week. Now in the past, I was benching 4 days per week, which was roughly 16 to 18 sets, plus some chest flies and other chest exercises. And I never really felt like I reached my limit. And honestly, it worked really well. I weighed 165 pounds and I benched 352 in a competition. So, a legitimate bench press. So like the chest, your back can also handle quite a bit of volume, 14 to 22 sets, or around 20 sets per week. And again, your back is a little bit smaller. And let's pretend you can row 200 pounds. 200-pound dumbbell row. Great. That's still probably less than your squatting. It's still probably less than your deadlifting. Maybe less than your benching. So, again, it's not as big of weight, so you can handle more sets. Hopefully, you're catching that trend right now. So, the lower body is far stronger than the upper body. And because of that, it's going to work with heavier loads, which means not as much sets. So your glutes only need about 4 to 12 sets, your quads about 12 to 18, and your hamstrings about 10 to 16 sets. Again, you can find all this. Just Google Mike Isertel muscle growth chart. That's exactly what I Googled and how I found it. And this leads us into the question, what's the best way to use this chart? Because I think it's human nature when we get a lot of data to just freeze. Analysis paralysis. What the heck do I do? This is so much. We freeze. I want to make this very clear. I do not recommend training in your maximum adaptable volume for every group all the time. I mean, let's just add up the minimal of the MAVs for each group. That's about 138 sets per week. If you work out 4 days a week, you're doing about 35 sets per time. That's just a lot. That's a lot. So what do? We periodize our program. You can break it into whatever type of blocks you want, but let's say we spend 12 weeks to really focus on lower body, and then you leave your upper body around the MEV, or at least the MVs, so you don't lose any size. Remember, MEV is a minimal effective volume to see some growth. MV is your maintenance volume. So if you don't want to prioritize a bigger chest, but you don't want to lose your chest, just do at least 8 sets of chest work and you're going to maintain what you have. Now there's another piece of nuance in this, in that a squat is a very taxing, or can be very taxing exercise, and it counts as 1 set. And then something like a hamstring curl isn't as intense, but should it still count as 1 set? I think just at the end of the day, you just have to use common sense. Compound lifts are better in general. Compound lifts are lifts that you're moving through multiple joints. So your squats, your deadlifts, your bench press, your overhead press, your power cleans, power lifts, Olympic lifts, bigger movements. Generally the exercises that you start the workout with. So use common sense, and you have to see how your body feels. Maybe for you, the accessories or the chest flies of the world only count as half a set, or maybe 0.75 sets. There's nothing wrong with counting them all as 1 set each. It's one of those things you really have to play around with, and you will figure out your body over time. That's just part of the journey. We have one more piece of research I want to go through, and it hits on a lot of different aspects of actually how to train, and then some of my personal advice as well. So this study was the resistance training variables for optimization of muscle hypertrophy, an umbrella review. Now, an umbrella review is like a meta-analysis of meta-analysis. It just has a ton of studies within this one study. So it looked at how many sets to do, how much frequency, intensity, contraction type, repetition duration, and actually had some other things that I didn't feel were as important to talk about here, but this is kind of the meat and potatoes of, hey, here's how you should actually train. In regards to your sets, doing 2 to 3 sets rather than 1 set showed a 40% increased hypertrophy compared to 1 set. However, 4 to 6 sets showed no grade. However, 4 to 6 sets were no greater than 2 to 3. I think this is usually a mistake I see by beginners. Their workout program will say 3 sets of 10 and they just do 30 reps and they call it a day. No, do 3 sets of 10. Make sure that each set is getting close to failure. And that's going to give you better growth than just 1 set of 30. But more is not better. You don't need to do 6 sets of 10. There used to be an old training program, 10 by 10, I think it was, that you just do 10 sets of 10 reps and move on for everything. And I don't remember what the study was. It's been a while, but they saw that 5 sets of 10 and 10 sets of 10 were pretty much the exact same as far as results. 1 set, probably not enough. 2 to 3, golden. More than 4, yeah, we'll see. Frequency. In general, it's better to spread your training out through the week. While you can do 15 sets of chest in one day, it's better to do it kind of 2 to 3 days. This really comes into play when you talk about splits or how you design your program. Are you doing upper, lower, push-pull, bro splits, the traditional like Mondays chest, Tuesdays back and buys, so on and so forth. So whatever splits you decide to do, however you decide to work your training program, one convenient way that I've done this is say, okay, I want to get 15 sets of chest this week. Okay, here's my 3 exercises that hit up the chest. Let's put those in 3 different days. All right, I want to get 20 sets of back. Okay, I'll put 2 exercises of back on this day, skip a day, 2 exercises of back on that day, skip a day, and kind of spread it out that way. I know it's not always feasible. Sometimes you're just stuck and you can only do legs 1 day a week for whatever reason. It is what it is. If you can spread it out, that's better. If not, just at least work your legs. Don't skip leg day, people. Intensity of your lifts, and this is going to depend on what your goals are. For hypertrophy, if you're just focused on, hey, I just want bigger muscles, it doesn't really matter. Heavy, light, medium weight, it's all going to work as long as you're hitting close to failure. If you want to get stronger, you still need to hit those lesser weights, but make sure you're also focusing on heavy weights. If you want more endurance, focus less on the heavy weights and more on the lighter weights. And when I say lighter, I don't mean you can just do this one weight forever. You know, this is so easy. I'm not even breaking a sweat. It's relatively lighter and relatively heavy and relatively medium. All of this is relative to what you can do. Contraction type. This is a cool thing you can work on here. So there's 3 different types of contractions that we'll talk about: concentric, eccentric, and isometric. Concentric is the shortening of the muscles. Eccentric is the lengthening. And then isometric is when there's no change in muscle length. So when you think about a bicep curl, curling up is concentric, lowering it down is eccentric. And then let's say on the way down you stopped at, elbows at 90 degrees and held it, that's isometric. Now, eccentric training or lowering can be a great tool to help with hypertrophy and tendon health. One way I'll do this is usually with a squat, I'll do a 10-second squat. So I unrack it and I slowly go down for 10 seconds. And you have to be extremely deliberate about your movement, and it's exhausting. And then you stand up. Or if you're doing a bicep curl it up, slowly lower it for 8 seconds and repeat. That's a little bit more eccentrically focused. Repetition duration. This isn't one of the big, oh my gosh, this is going to change your life. But if you're lifting a weight and it takes you more than 10 seconds, it's probably not good. It's either you're doing something really light and it's just not like, what are you doing? Or it's really heavy and you're straining a very long time at that point. So as long as the specific part of the rep takes less than 10 seconds, you're fine. I think this is most applicable when you really look at something like time under tension and you really push that into your training. Just make sure it's less than 10 seconds for the time under tension. Let's put it that way. let's summarize kind of everything we've been through, especially with this last study here. This is more so of me, my preachings, and kind of what I've developed and what I have gathered from everything in my practices. But practice at pretty much most of the rep ranges. It's okay to spend a little more time in your favorite. I mean, training should be enjoyable, especially if you're not like competing or working towards, some type of competition. Just make whatever you're doing fit your goals. I love lifting heavy. I love improving my 1 rep max. So I'm going to lift under 5 reps way more than I do over 20, especially for compound lifts. And, things like accessories, bicep curls, rows, triceps, I'll do those a little bit more reps. If you want to lift heavy, then practice lifting heavy. Eccentrics are fun to throw in and can potentially help, especially with injuries and staying healthy. When you're working out, start with large compound exercises first. That's your squat, bench, deadlift, Olympic lifts, so on and so forth. And then go into your smaller stuff. So the way I was taught is compound first and then slowly add more stability. So compound lifts. Let's just say you want to work on your chest today. So you're going to do your bench press. And then you're going to do some dumbbell bench, and then you want to do a little more chest, so then you go do cable flies, and then you want to do even more chest. It's probably too much chest, but whatever. So then you go do the chest fly machine. Compound, free weights, cables, machines. That order allows you to be more fatigued as you go on, but have more stability. If you started with your machines and then you did your cables, your chest is going to be fried by the time you try to get to your bench, and you're not going to have the same stability, the same strength, and you're probably going to risk a little bit more injury trying to do your compound lifts last. Last tip here. Spend time on your program. Periodize, focus on specific muscle groups and goals, and rest. You have to rest. When I first really started powerlifting, I was doing a 4-day program. It's a 5-3-1 program. Except I wasn't doing it 4 days a week. I was doing it 6 to 7 days a week. And I just kept running through those 4 days over and over and over and over. And recovery was not really a thing for me. And I vividly remember going to the gyms on Thursday and Friday, just being exhausted and ran down. And I tried to deadlift, and all of a sudden I failed at like it was so difficult because my body was just exhausted. And it wasn't until I forced myself to, I'm only working out these 4 days a week. There's rest days in between. I can recover fully. I got significantly stronger by doing less. Like I was working out less days and I got way stronger, had way more muscle. In 13 months, I improved my squat by 105 pounds. And like I said earlier, I started squatting in 6th grade, and this was in college. So it wasn't like I just started the newbie gains type of phase here. Like I was relatively, I guess, advanced, and I still added 105 pounds in 13 months. Now, I may have said the last study was the last study. We're going to talk about one more study here because this one looks at some of those social media phrases, some of those, I'll just get into it. So the study here is called Maximizing Muscle Hypertrophy, a Systematic Reviews of Advanced Resistance Training Techniques and Methods. It looked at advanced strategies, we'll call them advanced, such as agonist-antagonist supersets, upper-lower body supersets, drop and cluster sets, sarcoplasm stimulation training, and blood flow restriction. All of those are just tools that you can use. However, they are not the crux of your training and not really something you need to use in the beginning. It's one of those things that I consider majoring in the minors. Don't get caught up in that. Those are all minor things that makes some difference maybe, but it's not the main thing to focus on. You can throw it in. They might help. You just need to have kind of everything else figured out first before you get into these advanced strategies. I hope this helps. I hope you get the biggest muscles that you want. I hope you wake up one day with absolutely jacked muscles and you didn't realize it. That'd be cool. But on next week's episode, we're going to talk about how to optimize your nutrition for muscle growth because training means nothing without proper nutrition.
Thank you for listening to A Healthy Control podcast. You can find us at YouTube at A Healthy Control and make sure to subscribe. You can also reach me at ahealthycontrol@gmail.com with any comments or questions you'd like answered on the show. Reminder, A Healthy Control podcast is for entertainment purposes only and not in lieu of any medical advice. If you have any concerns about your health, please speak to a healthcare provider.